Evolution of a Nobody, Book 2, Chapters 14 and 15. The Trust Between Worlds. What was that? Raziel asked. She was the first between herself and her sister to speak, but even at a glance she could see that Liala was wondering the same thing. That Albert should gain strength by the way they used his body when they took turns possessing him was expected. It was, after all, still his flesh. But that was the first and second motion of the White Wing School of Martial Arts, Liala's heritage, while the eye gouge was the fourth motion of the Black Wing School, mine. Raziel couldn't have failed to recognize either one in 1,000 years. Could there be some school of combat here that is just like some fusion of our home? She asked herself, but immediately dismissed it as absurd. No, and that leaves me with questions. Raziel's mind raced until Liala snapped her out of it. Going in front of Albert, the disguised angel put her hands on both his cheeks and tilted her head toward him. Home. Back to your home now. Forget this for now, at least. No more of them. Just go. Just let's go back to your home, okay? Liala urged, and Albert nodded. The rush of a mere minute or three was gone, leaving his body shaking and unable to really even stand properly. Every scrap of skin over flesh was tingling like he was on a bed of pins and needles. The hairs on his body stood on end, and his eyes were wide and wild, darting around until Liala grabbed his face and made him focus. Yeah, okay. Let's go. Albert responded and let them walk him back to the table where Lisa stood, her own body shaking from the shock of what just happened. Albert barely had a mark. But while he retreated, the cries and moans of Jason followed after him, and the fact that he did not look back or show any regret or remorse shook her to the core. Are you all right? Lisa asked, while he snatched up his backpack in fumbling fingers and put it over his shoulders again. She went to touch him, and he stepped back. This stopped her in her tracks. Yeah, I'm fine, better than he is. Albert responded. He still felt the mix of stares, and heard muffled mumbles like they were distant voices heard through another room rather than people standing near enough for a gently tossed ball to be caught. You... Raziel raised her arm and pointed to Lisa. The young woman froze. Her eyes would have widened if they hadn't already done so, and the icy voice of the disguised demoness lost none of its venom in that single word. Lisa's brief courage threatened to wilt away. As a result, she said nothing. Come by our home tonight. I suppose we have to talk again after all, Raziel ordered, and then mouthed silently, Do not make me come get you. Lisa didn't answer, nor did Raziel or Liala stay to hear one. There was no need. Her answer would be in Lisa's arrival or absence. But the young honey-blonde girl lingered and watched as the trio walked off school grounds, leaving her standing in place, and Albert's target lying on the ground. Only when the trio were out of sight did she turn to look at what mayhem was left in what Lisa considered to be their wake. The school nurse, clad in her white uniform with the little red plus sign over her heart, was crouching down over Jason. She was a younger woman in her 20s, with a fresh face and strawberry blonde hair tied up in a bun, wearing white flat shoes that matched her one-piece button-down nursing clothes. What happened? She demanded, and people started mumbling, looking away rather than answering. The nurse's voice and intense stare did nothing to inspire answers. Her hands flew with the swiftness of bullets as popped open her first aid kit. Someone tell me now, she commanded, and Lisa snapped out of her stupor. She approached the nurse and her injured patient and said, It was Albert. Albert, Lamarck? You can't be serious? The nurse demanded. He did this? She pulled the boy's hands away from his eyes. They were bloody and cut, and the area around them was already swelling up enough to blind Jason almost completely. Yes, but Jason attacked him. Lisa said Jason threw a basketball and it hit Albert in the back of the head. Accident. It was an accident. Jason tried to protest through his moans. I didn't mean to... Liar, Lisa spat back. You're a liar. I heard about how you said you wanted to hurt him, and the basketball court is on the other side of the school. You want us to believe you took one of those from there, brought it over here, and threw it into his head by accident? Are you stupid? Or do you just think we are? Huh? She shouted down at him. Now you get your ass kicked like the shit you are, and you want to play like he's the bad guy? Enough, the nurse ordered, cutting off the rant. What did he actually do? She was touching the ribs and checking for injuries, drawing winces of pain from the boy. Does it hurt here? Yes, he hit all those, and face, nose. Jason was trying to move his arms to point, and the nurse lifted up his shirt. She winced. "I've treated a lot of Albert's accidents over the last 2 years, but good God," she thought as she began to mentally tally off Jason's injuries. While she didn't begin being very sympathetic to the bad seed, having seen the ravages of cancer on people, and knowing what she knew of Dr. Lamarck's willingness to fudge data for profit, she'd always treated Albert's injuries when she had to. And little by little her thoughts drifted closer and closer to that poor boy. After quiet bruise upon quiet bruise on a dejected face and a vacant, hollow look. "We're going to have to get you to the hospital," the nurse finally said with a sharp, decisive air about her. "You have a couple of ribs cracked and a broken nose, not to mention your eyes. You'll live, but you won't be too happy about it for a few days, maybe weeks." She went toward his shoulder, scooped his arm under his back, and looked down at the waifish English teacher. "You, help me, now! Get his other arm and help me walk him to my office while I arrange for him to go to the hospital." Right," she said, blinking several times as she was so brusquely addressed. Then the two got each arm under the young man's broader shoulders and began to walk him inside the infirmary. The sea of students parted like the Red Sea for the trio that slowly, steadily moved toward the entrance. Lisa watched them disappear. Her small fingers formed a small fist. Bile rose from her throat. The smell of blood and sweat was thick on the spot where she stood, and she bent over clutching her gut and vomited over the space, the sour taste of her own stomach acid lingering on her tongue well after the last drop of spittle fell into the now stained green grass. She shook while she brought herself upright again, went to the table, grabbed her discarded backpack, and made for the entrance. "At least nobody laughed at me when I threw up just then," she told herself, and left the area behind, along with all the gossip that had already begun. Getting back to the house was a blur, but the passage of time could still be measured, not by the passing of seconds, but rather by the gradual passing of Albert's tremors. As the adrenaline faded, so too did his shaking until you'd never know he'd even been in a fight, let alone distressed and trembling. They were already back to the apartment by the time anyone could really think of anything to say. "Is your head feeling okay?" Leala asked. Her hand went up his back to caress the spot. While the question was sincere, she'd seen enough head wounds to know he wasn't the best judge of his own injury if one was present. The sound of the rough coating of rubber bouncing off of his head was still fresh in Leala's mind. The shock of impact and sudden wince on his face as he felt the pain of the impact. Head injuries are some of the most dangerous and insidious, the angel recalled. Though he didn't wince when she touched or showed any sign of pain, she was not in a mood to argue. "My hands hurt worse," Albert replied. He turned his head, moving a little away from her probing touch. "I've never been in a fight before, and I didn't expect it to feel like that to hit someone." He opened the door, and as soon as it closed behind them, Leala said, "Stop." He did. "Head injuries are dangerous. Hold still," Leala said, and put her hand to the back of his head again. She muttered a string of syllables, casting her spell of healing. A white glow spread out over his body as the magic sought and healed various injuries. "Thank you," Albert said, and when the glow faded, he turned and locked the door behind him. "Thanks, Spanx. I have a question," Raziel said more seriously and closed her hand over his shoulder. Albert groaned and rolled his eyes. "It's thanks, Schmanks, Raz. Thanks, Schmanks." "Right, that. Whatever," she said, tumbling her words out in a rush. "You used the first, third, and fourth forms of the way we learned to fight. I want to know how." "Oh, that?" Albert asked and shrugged her off. He tossed his backpack toward the table in the living room, where it landed with a thud, and he walked past it to go to his room. "Yes, that," the sisters insisted and followed behind him. He entered the bedroom and turned on the television and the game station. "Was there a problem? I didn't mean to offend you if I did. I just did it." He was loading his save game, and within seconds he was racing Cammy over a hill toward his objective when the pair flopped down and seated themselves. Raziel planted herself in front of his computer and turned off the power save mode, while Leala planted herself on the floor with her back against his bed. "No," Raziel said while the computer came on. "How? How did you know all that?" Raziel asked. She turned to the side to face him and leaned forward. She and her sister snapped their fingers, and the illusions faded away, leaving the demon and angel in their natural states. "Oh," Albert said and paused the game. I remember the stuff you do when you—" He trailed off and scratched his head. "I guess I don't want to say use me, but you know, when you borrow my body for your square building or however that works." "Wait." Leala and Raziel's wings sprang out and went stiff when they spoke. "You remember?" They fairly demanded with dismayed glances at one another. "Yeah, should I not? Does that matter?" Albert looked back at them both, eyes darting from one to the other. "No!" Leala cried. "Yes!" Raziel exclaimed. Why?" Albert asked with a little frown. "And to which? Both?" "Yes," Raziel said, and got up from the chair on which she sat. "Albert, in the world we come from, nobody remembers what happens when they're possessed. It's considered impossible. Time possessed is like white noise to the one controlled. Part of why it's so intimate is precisely because you have to trust what the other person tells you they did. It's also why forced possession is such a serious crime." "Oh, well, for me it was just—" Albert's face became grave, no smile traced his lips as he spoke. "Like a dream after the fact. I'm pretty sure I'm not aware during. But afterward, when I sleep, I experience it all. What you say, what you do, everything. I didn't think it was that big of a deal." "It is. Humans must be far, far more different from the other races of our homeworld than either of us thought," Leala added with a thoughtful nod. "I guess, but it doesn't change anything among us, does it?" Albert asked and closed his eyes, unable and unwilling to meet their eyes with that question. No, I guess not. But this is a shock, and maybe this is something we can use," Raziel suggested. "Use how exactly?" Albert asked. "I don't know," Raziel said. Her wings began to droop, but her sisters did not. "Doubling your life," Leala answered immediately, her blue eyes alight with inspiration. "I don't understand," Albert said and furrowed his brow. "Doubling your life." Leala held her arms open. "You could go to school during the day, but one of us doesn't and stays awake at night. When you're ready to go to sleep, the other one of us takes possession of you. You sleep, and that one can train or study or learn, and you'll gain everything that one learns. We can take turns. That means it'll almost be like living without having to ever sleep. But you will sleep just— Does that make sense?" Her arms dropped down to the carpeted floor, and Albert began to nod with wild enthusiasm. "Yes, I get it. That would be, you could learn everything you wanted, filter through my memories of school, so you gain a—" He stopped when the pair stiffened. "What?" "Albert, sorting through your memories it's a bit much." "Are you sure?" Leala asked. Albert was very quiet for a moment. "I'm not doing this blind. You're going to have to sort through my memories anyway to learn what my mother is like in order to impersonate her. If I can bear the last year or two being sorted through, what's the first decade in some? Besides, I understand what kind of trust you put in me when you went to— what was it? Square one? My father once said—" He cleared his throat and deepened his voice just a smidge to imitate the old man. "Trust that isn't returned isn't just worthless, it's dangerous to the giver. So I'll give you the access you need. I'll just have to hope you don't turn on me like the rest of them did." He gave them a fragile smile. It shook for just a moment, wavering between the carefully constructed neutral mask he wore at school and a hint of happy that, like a plant growing from a seed, was just bumping the soil, ready to push it out of the way and emerge into the open air. Neither the angel nor the demon said a word. Not out loud, but their thoughts were the same. "Never in 1,000 years,"